institutions so that we can unlock both growth and transformation, so that we can benefit all South Africans, but we ensure that our principal focus is on the poor, the majority of whom are African and women. Now, we've made significant gains. We've made significant gains since 1994. I can give you a metric that represents that, and that metric is electricity, where in 1994, a minority of people in South Africa had access to electricity. 5.2 million homes were electrified. Today, we're looking at a significant larger number, about 15 million homes that have access to electricity. We've made significant gains even in the last 5 years in complex global circumstances where commodity prices have softened and we are a big exporter of commodities, where the global economy has not fully recovered from the 2008-9 global economic crisis, and one where we've seen the rise more recently of economic nationalism and economic populism that potentially closes markets elsewhere in the world. Just since the last National Policy Conference of the ruling party, we've seen 1.7 million additional jobs created. Today, from this morning when you're having breakfast to this evening when you are going to have dinner, the state would have invested over the course of this working day more than R1 billion in infrastructure development, in laying the foundations of growth and service delivery. But we must recognize our circumstances are challenging. We have a technical recession which potentially can deepen. We've had credit downgrades that are significant to us because they affect not only investor confidence, but also the cost of paying back the national debt. We have large numbers of young people who legitimately ask, where are their opportunities as workers, as skilled contributors in the economy, and as entrepreneurs? So our roadmap to move from where we are to where we want to be has at least 4 elements in our thinking. The first is a credible growth plan in the context, the constrained circumstances that I've pointed to. A credible growth plan that points to sectors with high economic potential, sectors that can grow, that can create more jobs, that can attract investment. But it also involves effective implementation, implementation within government and implementation within the private sector. The second part of our roadmap is to transform the economy, to make it more inclusive, to give opportunities to more Black South Africans, to young people, to the rural excluded and to the urban unemployed. And critically for us, to address issues of economic concentration. The third area is integrity in government. To be seen and to act swiftly against corruption and to deal with the state capture allegations both honestly and swiftly, to ensure that we manage our state-owned companies in the interest of all South Africans, that our fiscal policies are sustainable, and that we inspire confidence in our people. And the fourth element is to deepen partnerships. Government is a powerful instrument, but government cannot pull a society forward alone. It needs partners. It needs partners in the private sector, businesses that are here today, businesses elsewhere who are not present today, who need to join hands with us. It needs partners with organized labor, with trade unions, with workers who produce the wealth of our country, to say, how do we work together to ensure that we create more jobs, we bring more investment into the economy, we grow this economy, and we transform it. And partnerships is about everybody bringing something in order to increase the size of the economy, and that in the economy that all South Africans can benefit from. Now, in the public discussion, there's been a significant concentration on issues of economic exclusion. How to make sure that our economy does better and that our economy delivers to ordinary South Africans. So I want to look briefly at issues of ownership and control in the economy. And I'm going to give a case study of the work of the competition authorities. That's the Competition Commission and the Competition Tribunal, and ultimately, through their work, also the Competition Appeal Court. Over the last 8 years or so, we've begun to re-engineer the work of the competition authorities. And they've focused on two key areas, and in future they will focus on a third one. The first area they focus on is mergers and acquisitions. What should apply when one company buys another? And the second one is they focused on cartels and abuse of market dominance. So let me give you an example to illustrate what it is that an ANC-led government seeks to do. Coca-Cola recently announced that it wanted to amalgamate a number of its bottling operations, introduce efficiencies, and then later ensure change in the overall shareholding. So they come to the competition authorities and government, and they put that proposition on the table, because in our Competition Act, they come via a regulatory process. By the end of the discussion, as we engage with this multinational corporation, we reached an agreement with them, an agreement that seeks to advance the national development goals of our country. And the areas we focus on and that we reach agreement on include the following. One, that they need to ensure that the merger supports jobs. So Coca-Cola has given a commitment that effectively means that for a 5-year period, they will maintain the aggregate levels of employment in the South African economy. Second, we ask them to ensure that their ownership structures represent a transformed ownership. So they've committed to move from 11% black economic participation in their shareholding progressively to 30% BEE ownership in the shareholding. Third, they agreed that they'll set aside 800 million rand in a fund that will support small businesses, bring black farmers into their supply chain, ensure that township enterprises are supported, and that we in fact ensure that the footprint of a large company supports the development of more South Africans as active economic citizens in our country. Fourth, they agreed that an iconic South African brand called Appletiser that was bought over by the Coca-Cola Group will remain committed to South Africa. Production will be here local, that more of Appletiser and Grapetiser will be exported to the rest of the world, that Appletiser itself will have a minimum of 20% BEE ownership, and that Appletiser will buy more local products like grapes and apples and pears. And by the way, just in the space of 1 year, they've increased their procurement of red grapes from less than 10% to more than 40% as a result of that agreement. And finally, they committed that they would open up spaza shops. You know, in spaza shops, the fridges are largely owned by the big companies like Coca-Cola. And the condition to that fridge is you can only stock products of one company, Coca-Cola. And we've said you've got to empower small spaza shop owners to have choice, to bring in the products of competitors so that consumers in townships have choice, so that there's a bit of price competition, so that spaza shop owners can make a bit more money. And they've agreed that 10% of these fridge space and display cabinets in the very small spaza shops will be available for competitors. Now, I've taken that as an example. I could have given you one of 10, 20, 30 examples to illustrate that purposive government that is focused on transformation can use the economic toolbox to ensure that all South Africans benefit from this economy. Let me use the example of cartels. These are examples where private sector companies, or any company really in the economy, colludes, cooperates with their competitors, that has the effect essentially of carving up markets, of increasing prices, of reducing competition. It's not allowed in our law. So the competition authorities have been working actively over the last number of years, building up their capability to catch companies who are engaged in these practices, because these practices don't help South Africans. And we've been very successful, and there are many, many parts of the economy that we have, in fact, cracked down. Let me just give a few small examples of cases that have been successfully concluded. The first is the example of fertilizers. Fertilizers are important because they represent a big input for farmers, and so they affect the price of food on the tables of South Africans. So a large South African company, Sectoral, is also a producer of the feedstock that goes into fertilizers. And we uncovered that Sectoral had deep concentration right at the top, through the blending of the fertilizers, right up to the selling of the fertilizers to farmers. And we saw that they were in breach of the competition laws. And we were able to get a remedy agreed there, that they must break up their blending operations and sell 5 of their 6 blenders to other entrepreneurs. That's an example where you can act decisively as the state. A second example is the construction industry. Construction industry were accused of collusion in the 2010 World Cup and in some of the other associated products. They were investigated by the Competition Commission, and a number of them stepped forward when the investigation was underway and said, look, let's come clean. We're prepared to acknowledge what we've done and enter into settlement with the state. One element of that settlement, and there was a comprehensive set of areas, but one part of it said, open up the construction industry, bring more black South Africans into it, stimulate competition there, ensure that there's integrity from the private sector, because issues of integrity and corruption is not just in the public sector, it's also in the private sector. And today we have a commitment and an agreement with the construction industry that is something of an example to other sectors. Murray and Roberts, for example, have just sold off the entire construction business to a black South African consortium. 100% will now be owned by a black South African consortium. A major company like Avenge will be selling about 50% of their equity to black South Africans. A big company like WBHO will take 3 black-owned construction companies and help to lift their turnover to 25%, that of WHBO, in the next few years. Now, these are examples, I've just selected them, of real efforts to transform and bring opportunities to black South Africans based on entrepreneurship, based on all South Africans having access to the economy. Citizenship, politically, is represented most powerfully by the right to vote. That was where 1994 got us. Citizenship in the economy is represented powerfully by a job, by an entrepreneurial opportunity, by the ability to be a manager or an owner in the economy. And that's what we're getting through a number of these agreements. Let me take the example of ArcelorMittal. It's a major steel maker in South Africa. They were investigated by the competition authorities for their anti-competitive behavior in steel. By the end of the discussion, when we concluded the settlement, they paid a major fine to the competition authorities, and that goes back to the National Revenue Fund, so they help to ensure that we build houses and provide healthcare for South Africa's people. But critically, they also committed that they're going to boost investment in the steel mills, put 4.6 billion rand extra investment in South Africa so that they inject investment liquidity in our market, and also that they would do a BEE deal to transform ownership in the steel industry. Now, these are examples I've given, some of many, many others that we can cite, of real, tangible, bold actions by government to transform this economy and to grow the economy. Now, where to from here? We're still faced with significant levels of economic concentration in the economy. That's not good for South Africans, it's not good for growth, and it's not good for jobs. And so we are looking at changing the mandate of the competition authorities, giving them more power and more authority to investigate where there are high levels of concentration and to give effective remedies to deal with those. So we will be introducing, through the cabinet process, amendments to the Competition Act that takes this important institution, the competition authorities, and give them a wider remit so that we help to ensure that our economy, in fact, is inclusive, that all South Africans have opportunity, that exclusion must be something of the past, not something of the present or the future. I want to begin to conclude by saying that the actions on competition and concentration that we're taking are part of a wider package of interventions. Infrastructure investment is critical to growth. In this year ahead alone, we are committing and working with the private sector to unblock investment in infrastructure. And what we seek to be able to do is pump 330 billion rand into public and private infrastructure. This would be rebuilding the foundations of growth. You need energy. You need logistics systems to move your goods around. You need water supply. You need infrastructure in the ICT area, broadband and fiber optic cables. And South Africa's people need healthcare services and schools, and they need access to services in communities. They're all a product of infrastructure investment. Industrial funding, we've asked the Industrial Development Corporation for this year ahead to dig deep into their resource base, to work their balance sheet actively, and to commit between 15 and 18 billion rand of fresh investment in the economy. And because the IDC has private sector counterparts, to attract up to 30 billion rand of private sector investment in those projects so that we can get South Africa working. We've set up a 1.5 billion rand steel competitiveness fund to deal with the challenge of the global glut in steel markets. We're bringing new foreign investment in. A major Chinese automaker is opening a new car-making plant in Nelson Mandela Bay. And they're going to bring, it's an investment of 4.3 billion rand, the first new auto plant in more than 40 years, by the way, that has been set up in South Africa. We're bringing new foreign and domestic investors in as partners in Score Metals, a major steel-making company. And finally, by way of example, we know we're a data-driven society, that the 21st century is the century of data, that what oil and steel was to the 20th century, our cell phones, our laptops, and the information technologies that we use will be the critical fuel. Data costs must come down.
Have we taken...
Back to Nazareth in a short while here on Morning Live, but let's bring you some sports news. Proteas women's captain
We need a more effective state, that partnership of an effective private sector, effective representation of the voice of workers, effective government can ensure that we build on the many successes and that we acknowledge the challenges we are, but that we build on those strengths to deal with the challenges that we face, that we create jobs, that we deepen economic development, that we grow this economy inclusively, and that we transform the economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Okay, so now we have the conversation. Can I have an indication who wants to start the round? I've got one indication, two indications, 3, 4. We'll do 4, 5 in this round. So I'll take these 4 that we've seen so far. Let's start at the back table that we had there. Can we get the mic there quickly?
Good morning. The name is Tabaramule from Ikansa Holdings. I will start off with what I asked when the Minister of Davis was presenting with regards to value supply chain of these companies. Much as it's nice to have your accelerometers coming into agreements, we often find that there is no black traders. Like they don't have the people who are black, who are buying like your make steels, like your NJRs from accelerometer and directly into the market, making it more difficult because of us as black suppliers have to then buy from your make steels and NJRs, making our competitiveness very difficult. So we must find a way to getting into those guys and saying, as you create people who will be selling directly to your customers, create black ones as well. That's just the first point that I want to point out. The second one, which is a very contentious issue, I've debated with many people, is that on the automotive side and the banks, there's an issue of VAT, that when you finance your car as a person, the bank charges you interest on VAT and yet they claim it back. Now, how do you pay for VAT for 5 years when they claim it back within 2 months? That's very contentious, and please look at it because it can save millions or billions of rands for many consumers and the rest of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Here in the middle, we had an indication. Front table, middle. Is it me?
Good morning, distinguished guests and Minister, thank you.
I didn't think that was the middle, but nevertheless.
Yes,
okay.
I was for the next round, but I saw the mic come my way, Daryl. Thank you very much for that opportunity.
It's going to cost you extra now, eh?
You haven't got Jewish blood, do you?
No.
My name is Gino Delfava. I hail from Umtata. I'm an entrepreneur in the freight and logistics sector, which is highly capital intensive, TG, as you would know. It's untransformed and it's monopolized by those German multinationals, DHL and DSV. I think most of the business people in the room know them. So it is highly capital intensive, and so it doesn't allow for new black entrants like ourselves. I've been in that space for 40 years, and I'm so glad that the 4,000 delegates next door are discussing the oceans economy, TG, and the Operation Pakis, and how black South Africans can participate in this economy. But my question to Minister Patel is, as you alluded to, that government is looking at the corruption element. As an entrepreneur for 40 years, when we go to B-show and these government departments, we see the arrogance from the public servants. They treat us like scum. So the ANC, since the advent of the democracy with Madiba, we have a wonderful constitution and wonderful policies, DG, but they are not implemented by these lazy, slothful public servants. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll come to the middle. Yeah? The front table in the middle. Good.
Thank you. Morning, everybody. My name is Bucks. I'm representing a company called Ikageng Electrical Construction. It's grade 8 EP, 100% black-owned company with a staff of about 150 employees. Mama, two questions. I've raised them previously, but I think they're relevant individuals here who can assist. How do we penetrate, especially to the Minister Patel, how do we penetrate the African market, especially on the electrical part? How can you assist black individual companies? How do we get in there? Because it's very difficult to get in there. Practically, Minister, please. The second question, that will go to the TG. How do we also form a part of a team that normally goes around the globe with the president for investment opportunities? Because we, at PBF members, we felt left behind most of the time when the president or the minister is around the globe for investment opportunities. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and let the ANC grow much bigger than this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At the same table, and then we'll come to you, Denisa.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. My question, I guess, can be answered by the Minister, and the TG might also get involved in responding to this question, because it has to do with the coordination between and among government departments and institutions in terms of realizing this radical economic transformation. If you look at, from the most practical point of view, as a business, there are a number of things that you have to do to establish yourself or to start a new project. There's something called an environmental impact assessment as an example. There are other requirements that may be from different departments. As a business, that creates a lot of difficulties. We are told that in Namibia, the government has committed to a time frame of 3 months for an environmental impact assessment. In South Africa, an environmental impact assessment will take you more than a year. It will cost you 2 million rand before you do anything. Now, if our counterparts in Namibia can commit to a 3 months turnaround time on an environmental impact assessment, I do not understand why this Democratic Republic of South Africa cannot do the same, if not better. So, Minister, how do we ensure that government coordinates these activities? I have read the economic transformation discussion document that has been discussed on the other side. It alludes to certain things, but it does not practically say, as government, this is the coordination that needs to happen, or at least the ANC saying to government, this is how you need to coordinate these activities to ensure that ultimately the radical economic transformation happens. And I think it's something that needs to be looked at. It has to do also with funding. Government has created the Black Industrialist Program with the DFIs as part of that, and there's access to market committees. There are so many disintegrated institutions and initiatives towards achieving the same objective. Can government better coordinate this movement towards radical economic transformation? If it does not do that, it will be a dream deferred again. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. And then the last question for this round.
I will very gladly take the microphone to Mama Mumzi. How are you?
Fine, how are you? Tabitha. Good morning, Minister, and thank you for your presentation. I'm Danisa Baloyi, the President of the Black Business Council. Minister, as you know, money makes the world go round, and I think Tabiso sort of referred to that. Our members still struggle with the DFIs, and I know that you are responsible for one of the biggest, the IDC. Reality is that more than 20 years down the line, we still have a problem as black business accessing money from the IDC. If we really are serious about radical economic transformation, something has got to give at the DFIs to have rules and regulations that are not more stringent than the banks. We know at the moment that the financial institution, whether they agree or not, are on an investment strike. So we depend on the DFIs. How can we be sure that after this conference, there'll be a plan that will ensure that funding for black business, for small, medium-sized enterprises, take a different course altogether that will ensure that we don't fill in 1 million forms, be dragged for 18 months, and then in the end don't get the funds. Lastly, how do we ensure that, Minister, the colluders, well, I don't even like to call them colluders because if it's the private sector and big business, they collude, black people are corrupt. No, the companies that break the law and in my view corrupt are brought to book to ensure that they help with transformation. You've talked to a few who have had, some moral Damascus and come to the fore. But there are plenty more who refuse, even in the construction sector, to do the right thing. They still won't do it. And many others, and we can talk to many areas in the arts and culture. It's collusion or corruption everywhere. Black business is closed out. This conference has to come up with a plan that will eliminate it once and for all, so they do not continue to collude, that the value chain are open up. I'm glad my brother spoke about it because that's the problem. Thank you, Darren.
Thank you very much. Minister, over to you.
Well, first, let me thank the business representatives who asked those questions. At 9 o'clock this morning, I have to report for duty and go and clock in at the National Policy Conference. So I'm going to keep the remarks very brief. First, on the first person who commented, I didn't catch the name. I agree that if we are going to be successful in deepening both transformation, but I'd also say growth itself, then we've got to bring black South Africans throughout the value chains of each of the key sectors of the economy. In the area of steel, we've now made some initiatives that we think are beginning to yield results, but there continue to be areas of challenge, and the 1.5 billion rand steel competitiveness fund is going to concentrate, while it's not exclusively for black South Africans, there's a specific concentration. It's also available to black industrialists downstream, which is key for our future. The second one around the VAT, I'm sure the Minister of Finance would be interested in commenting on that. Gino, I hear your issues around concentration in freight and logistics. That's why we're looking at the mandate again of the competition authorities. I hear you too on the issue of public servants. The word servant is a critical one. We, whether we're cabinet members or whether we're departmental officials, we are there to serve South Africans. Arrogance has no place in what we do. We're there not to tell South Africans why things can't be done. We're there to help South Africans to make things happen. Because when we do that, we unlock the energy, the creativity of our people. That drives economies. That generates tax revenues. That gives us the wherewithal to be able to deal with our mandate. Bucks, on the issue that you've raised about the African story, let me just make this point. The big growth market on infrastructure is the rest of the African continent. It has been estimated that the infrastructure gap, Treasurer General, on the continent is something like $100 billion, an enormous sum of money that has to be invested every year to be able to ensure that Africa can meet the needs of a rapidly urbanizing population and still relatively high growth rates in many parts of the continent. And so there are very practical things we can do, that the South African government becomes the flag carrier for South African companies. And we can talk separately about some of the specifics of how we can do that. But we take the point, Bucks, that that's a critical part of what we need to do now. Someone raised the issue of environmental impact assessments and the broader coordination. There is a lot more that government needs to do. So what we've done now is we've created a one-stop shop. One place, and by the way, it's not available only to foreign investors. It's also available to local investors. One place that you go and you say, look, we want to bring in this new investment. We want to be able to do these things. But there are many different government departments we work with. Can you help us connect these different departments and make it as seamless and easy a process as possible? That has been launched by the President. It's open for business, and I encourage you to get involved with them. And as you find that they do good things, let us know. And where there are hiccups and challenges, let us know, because we've got to iron them out. It's not going to work perfectly from day one. But the lesson from China, the Chinese don't give up when there's a problem. They just fix that little problem, move on to the next one. And that's what we've got to do as South Africans. Not reinvent things all the time, but make the existing things work. On the environmental impact assessment, important to say that we have both a legal and constitutional responsibility to ensure that our economic development is sustainable, that we balance it against the needs of future generations. And that's what the EIAs are about, ensuring that the water supply is safe, that what we do in the economy doesn't contaminate water supply, doesn't disrupt communities unnecessarily. And so what we have to do with the EIA process is ensure that it has proper integrity, that it's not overturned by the courts. If we rush them, inevitably you make mistakes. Inevitably there will be someone who will appeal to the courts and your delay will be much longer. The Minister of Environmental Affairs has in fact embraced the idea of moving swiftly, but at the same time paying attention to environmental sustainability. And she's come up with a really nice idea, which is a strategic environmental assessment, where for certain projects, you look at all those projects together, like a big infrastructure project. Instead of 10 or 20 separate EIAs, you can do a combined one. And her team is working closely with the economic ministries. And I think we're seeing good progress there. May I finally say to our dear colleague, Ms. Baloyi, that the point about development finance institutions doing their work better is well taken. We always have room to improve, but I also have good news for you. And the good news I have is that we've re-engineered both the mandate and the way in which the Industrial Development Corporation works. And here are the results. In this last financial year, the IDC committed 4.7 billion rand to black industrialists. This is not budget that's set aside. These are actual binding commitments. 77 projects with black industrialists that the IDC now support. And that, by the way, is a 60% increase in what the IDC did the year prior to that. If you add black empowered companies, not just black industrials, but black empowered companies, then in the last financial year, the IDC committed 10.8 billion rand of capital. Can we do better? Yes, we can. Can your advice help us? Absolutely. Can we improve our systems? Yes. But let's also celebrate the significant gains we are making, and I know that you also acknowledge and support. So thank you very much. I wish I had more time to be able to engage, but the people who ultimately represent the mandate makers want to make sure that members of cabinet are there to hear the views of members of the ANC from branches all over South Africa. Democracy in action. I've really enjoyed this very brief engagement. Thank you very much, and I know the Treasurer General will be dealing with one of the questions that's been put to him. So thank you very much, Darryl, and thank you very much for the very warm reception we've had here this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. We appreciate the input that you've made, and we understand time constraints. So thank you very much. I'd also like to recognize Minister Dlamini, Batabile Dlamini, that has joined us. We did welcome you in absentia, but we're very happy to see you with us. Thank you very much for joining. We're going to allow another round of questions. We have the Treasurer General Rea. He will wrap up just now and also answer these questions that were put to him. But we're going to allow another opportunity. And also bear in mind that we have with us Minister Gert Oosthuizen, Sport, Minister of Home Affairs, Glengiwe Mkhize, Deputy Minister of Tourism, Elizabeth Tabete, Minister of Social Development, Batabile Dlamini. So if you want to raise anything in that domain as well, I'm sure they will be very happy to answer that as well. But let's go for the second round. Okay, I've seen 3 hands. The minister's going to ask as well. Sorry? Okay. All right, let's start on that side. We'll give the business an opportunity first, yeah.
Hi, Trushin from ZNZeka. I'd just like to touch a bit on what the minister... Oh, sorry. I just want to touch a bit on what the Minister of Economic Development brought up as to the shortage in capital investment and infrastructure investment. One of the things that I think we have not actually highlighted, and this has probably been problematic since the ANC has taken over, is the issue of population. And funnily enough, population hasn't entered into the economic realm in South Africa. When you have these huge intergenerational transfers, these shifts of capital from one generation to the next, investing in infrastructure and education, this religious question, this question that goes to the soul, and is a social question as well, is what about samsara, the wheel of life, fair share? Shouldn't the youth be bargaining with the working generation? Shouldn't there be this element of bargaining between the two generations where the youth is willing to pay back some of that investment in some form? Now, usually one would talk about social welfare and social security. And I think in the South African context, we've kind of clouded the two. Whereas social welfare was the assistance program, social security wasn't fully implemented, even though it's in our constitution. Because social security is based on that concept of samsara, or fair share, that every generation should receive that fair share. And I think because we did not structure our economy in that way, it has made us very uncompetitive. And we have some of our Chinese colleagues here, and they actually identified that. And this is why they had the one-child policy. So when it comes down to being uncompetitive, if an economy has a very small youth population, it makes them incredibly competitive because the government does not need to redistribute funds to the next generation. They now have huge amounts of funds to invest in infrastructure and invest to support business. So I feel, and I've said this quite a lot, and I think the actuarial community has spoken about this quite a lot, is that there needs to be a movement to put in place a government actuaries department. The developed world has put it in place. Japan went through an industrial revolution. They had a government actuaries department. Why are we still sitting on the fence in terms of putting a government actuaries department in place in South Africa? Because we need to also take a look at how demographics affects economics, affects finance. And along with that question comes along in terms of the sense of security is how well are we protecting our borders do we just let anyone cross our borders? We haven't invested enough in our military. That was highlighted in the discussion documents. If you have floods of population coming into the country, what does that do to your infrastructure needs? What does that do to healthcare? These questions have not been fundamentally asked at the government level because we don't have a government actuaries department. So I would like to, both from social development as well as maybe the ANC Treasury, pose the question as to whether we've considered it and are we thinking of implementing a government actuaries department?
Thank you very much. The gentleman here in the middle, just indicate to me again. There, yes. Very, very briefly, we're giving you a minute. Thereafter, 5,000 Rand a minute.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Paul. I'm known as PK. I'm coming from a company called PK & Son Financial Consultant. You see, TG, I wanted to ask actually the minister, but you have to help him. To me, if we have to take the radical transformation approach, we have to actually accept the fact that there is an oligopoly in the market. If you are looking at the oligopolistic market, it means that one side you have got the suppliers that are oligopolistic. If you buy from those suppliers, you sell into an oligopolistic market as well. Now, if radical transformation has to take place, you have a black man coming in between those two. Now, the minister did not address, except that we know that from the procurement side, there's this 30%, but he did not address it properly to say, look, a black man in between those locked access. This is the way we are going to break the oligopoly. Forget about monopoly. Oligopoly is powerful than monopoly. Now, when you take the approach of radical transformation, you have to have some few things with you. One of them is IP. Another one is space. Today we know that in the whole world, the future growth is in Africa, which includes us. So we need to know what program the Minister of Trade and Industry, the Minister of Economic Development has put together for this black business in order to access that market, because the whole oligopolistic market are going to come and take over again, and they're still left behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll come to the minister quickly. I've noticed you at the back. You're going to close, but minister first. Yes, Minister Lingiwe Mkhize. She's going to ask a question.
Thank you very much, Program Director. I'm going to join the TG and answer one or two questions. But I wanted to raise something very, very important, which seemed to be invisible or unspoken about in PBF forum. You know, the Minister Patel spoke about progress that we've made since 1994. But in this space of talking radical socioeconomic transformation, there's a big elephant in the room. While government has made a clear move in terms of gender mainstreaming, talking up to a point where we talk 50-50 representation, if the minister was still here and we asked him to speak to percentages of people who have benefited, you'll be shocked that women are still excluded. I think it's important because this is a business forum. You know, there are networks, golf clubs and so on. Women are not there. If MultiChoice have a deal and they are looking for an empowerment group, men are the first ones to cut the fire because they play golf together while women are going home to prepare food and do this. So in this era, really, we have a serious challenge in terms of saying we need to begin to crunch the numbers in terms of beneficiaries of women in percentages, in strategic sectors. We have female engineers and women have really made inroads in strategic sectors. But in most instances, when you meet them, you think it's the secretary to the engineer, and you find that they are both equally qualified. But the woman hasn't got a business that, you know, she owns. So that's something which really should be given special attention, because we are in the era where we say nobody should be left behind. And women are the majority in this country. So earmark, targeted, monitored programs are critical. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We're going to conclude the question rounds with the gentleman there. Yes. Minister, there was a question to you, so you can come up front. Yeah. Minister Dlamini, there was a question also to you. And also, we do have Minister Dlodlo from Communications in the House as well, apparently. You can, to us. Oh, she stepped out, okay.
Thank you, Dara. I think my name is Philip Dybos. I'm the president of SANTACO, the South African National Taxi Council. And my question is actually directed to the ANC. And I believe because the ANC is the government, this question needs to be effectively responded by the ANC. TG, in 2007, we accepted the taxi recapitalization program as a taxi industry. And we believed from that particular program, there is going to be an emancipation of empowerment. And today, when we look into South Africa and we look into how black people are empowered through participation in companies, we found that the taxi industry, who is the major commercial transport user in this country, and also if one goes to fuel, you would find that the taxi industry is not being taken care of. I want to ask the ANC government whether they have forgotten about this taxi industry, which has actually defeated the apartheid government. If you remember the railway stations, during the railway trains and the buses, they were defeated by the taxi industry during our struggle in the country. Now my question is, has the ANC government abandoned the taxi recapitalization program? Has the ANC government abandoned the empowerment which was going along with this program as far as empowering the taxi industry on different commodities which are going along with the taxi industry? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll go with the two ministers first, and then the TG will answer the questions posed to him and also wrap up the morning. So I think Minister Mkhize, if you can deal with the border issue and any of the other. Okay, Minister Dlamini.
Good morning.
Thank you, Program Director, the Treasurer General, Sislengiwe, my other colleagues, Minister Lodlo, and Deputy Ministers. I'll be very brief, but maybe there are three issues that I would like to raise, TG. That maybe the PBF must organize a session, not today, for women in business and women and business. And secondly, sexual harassment.
Welcome back to the Progressive Business Forum breakfast, and we've just
the issues of women that occupy senior positions in the private as well as public sector, the way they are treated, and thinking that they have to be supported because they can't think for themselves. Someone must think for them. And you see that through the reduction of the remuneration when a woman occupies a senior position in big companies. The second issue I would like to talk to is the issue of social development. Social development is very wide, and in South Africa we always talk about social development as if it's just a small thing right up in the corner there. Social development is about a basket of services, and in South Africa we have a mix, and you find other departments contributing towards social development. Water, housing, education, electricity, infrastructure, and so forth. It contributes towards social development. But also, social welfare is a very important arm of social development. And actually, each and every business in South Africa must have social development or social welfare, so that you look at the interests and the health of your own workers, and not at the side of spinning profits from the side of government. But secondly, people that come to social development come through social welfare. And then from there, it's either they are sent to social security, which is grants, others integrated development, which is also not easy. It's a lot of work because you have to come up with strategies of taking families out of the cycle of poverty. And for now, as South Africans, we are only focusing on grants, and people between the ages of 19 and 59 that have never been employed are not catered for in our social security system. And then thirdly, right now we are busy with a discussion document on comprehensive social security. And then in comprehensive social security, you look into the poor, and also look into the ones that are employed but are not part of the pension system, so that when they finish work, they don't become the burden of the state or the taxpayers. And then thirdly, you also look into those that work informally, because we see people here in South Africa that are in
Good morning once again from the Progressive Business Forum breakfast here at Nasrec, taking place on the sidelines of the policy conference. And this morning we heard from the Minister of Economic Development, Ibrahim Patel. The Minister started off by acknowledging that yes, South Africa had its economic challenges, there was poverty and unemployment, but the Minister going to great that there have been inroads, there has been progress, and he pointed to a number of practical examples where transformation has taken place across the various sectors. Now, a while ago, the minister was involved in transformation in the construction industry, and it'll be interesting, we hope to catch up with him later to ask him if this kind of transformation will be possible in other industries like finance and the automotive industry, because we know that the ANC leadership has been quite active in engaging these sectors. There are quite a few ministers here this morning. On the podium at the moment is Minister Bathabeli Dlamini, and she's answering questions from the audience about social.
Thank you, Hasina Kathrada, there live from Nasrec. We'll get an update a little bit later on that. Now, the fifth